Good afternoon and welcome to day 23 of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. We have been reading all month where we are giving voice to words written by Black people all around the world. I am LD, the founder of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, and today is 23. It is Marriage Day. So you know what we always like you to do before we get into our topics. We want to remind you of what you need to do, and that is you need to go and to subscribe to greatblackreadaloudday.org and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us online at Black Read Aloud on social media. And we are so happy to have special guests today. We have Mrs. Andrea Riley and her husband, Mr. Cliff Riley, with us here today to talk about marriage. And it's day 23. And they are the owners of the Marriage Service Technicians and the writers of a blog as well. And so welcome.
Thank you. We're honored to be here. Very excited to be a part.
Well, I am excited to have you here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Marriage Service Technicians, and then we'll get to your reading after a couple of questions because I'm intrigued by your name.
Okay. Well, Cliff and I obviously are married. We've been married for 30 years. And the Marriage Service Technicians is our mission is to equip relationships with tools to go the distance. And that came out of a time when we did not have tools and we struggled and we weren't really sure if we were going to be able to stay married. And at that time, we just couldn't find resources to help us with that season of life. So when we finally got to the point where we prayed our way through and made it through and pulled together whatever we could figure out. And once we kind of got in a rhythm and understood some things, we looked around and said, oh, there's so many people that were hurting and so many people that needed help that really became our passion. So we turned our pain into our passion. So that's how we got started. And here we are.
Well, that is fascinating. 30 years is, in some circles, is a few eternities. So congratulations.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
That's it. My parents have been married for 40. This year will be 45 years.
Wow.
45.
Wow.
Awesome.
45 years. And so it is truly, and that's a long time. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this title, The Marriage Service Technicians, reminds me of something that I had a few years ago. I had this idea. I was sitting thinking about books, and this idea came to me about the marriage service agreement. And the premise of the book is that there's this couple who are planning to get married, and they decide that, the about to be groomsman, he has this affinity for his car. He takes care of his car. And I was thinking about this from the perspective that if people took care of their marriages the way they took care of their cars, we take our cars in for 30, 60, 90,000 miles. What if we did that with our marriages? They would last longer. They would be healthier because we are committed to servicing our marriage in much the same way that we do our cars, as opposed to letting them, fall away, by the wayside.
And then trade them in for a newer model. See?
And then trade them in for a newer model and find out, you know what, you maintain it the same way, so you're going to have the same problem.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
And so a number of years ago, I used to be a consultant, and I worked at an oil and gas construction company. And one of the projects that I worked for them, I worked on the IT side, was working with the fleet and maintenance department. And he explained to me the difference between maintenance and repair with vehicles and equipment. He says maintenance is the stuff that you do, regularly. This is the stuff that you have to do. He said repair is when it's broken, and it takes more to fix it. And so that idea, it actually stemmed from that, because it played into that idea about marriage. And so when I saw your name, the marriage service technicians, I'm like, yeah, I need to talk to them.
Yes.
So do you believe the same thing in terms, or something similar, or maybe not, in terms of marriages, regular service intervals, so that you have the tools to keep your marriage working well, and prevent some stuff?
Exactly.
You want to go, honey, or you?
You can speak, since I'm going to read. I'll let you talk.
Okay. It's interesting that you came up with that, because that's how we got our name. I work in IT, and I'm a technician, and then the part that you're talking about, maintaining vehicles, that's one of the things this was done intentionally, because I know in the past, when my wife and I, when we would attend certain marriages, seminars, whatever, it'd be way more women than men. I mean, it'd be sure, but it'd be way more women than men. And so when we came up with the marriage service technicians, the idea was to, first of all, to attract men. And the things that we teach and the principles that we teach, it is in correlation to maintaining a vehicle. Because men can relate to a vehicle, maintaining a vehicle, whether it's, changing oil, replacing tires, but men can relate to that because we like to fix things. And that was to, attract the men, and also get them, excuse me, and then, get them to be able to gain insight into how to maintain their marriage, their marriages. And so, yes, so that's how we got the name Marriage Service Technician, because I'm a technician, I'm an engineer, I work in IT. And so we just put it all together. And so then we started using principles of maintaining and repairing. The same, like you just said, the same way to maintain a vehicle, you need to apply the same principles in maintaining your vehicle. And hopefully that when you learn the principles, you don't have to wait till it's broke.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because, or like my wife just says, or try to trade it in for a newer model, because you have the same mindset when you maintain the first vehicle. Well, when you get the newer model, and you have the same mindset, you're still going to break the newer model the same way.
Absolutely.
So that's how we came up with the name.
Yes.
Yeah. As my dad told me the other day, he said he was driving behind me. I had a problem with the vehicle. And so he came to the rescue once again. And he followed me back to my home. And he said, "You're braking? Your braking is not good." He says, "You brake at the last minute." He says, "You know how many brakes I put on this truck? I have only put on one set of brakes on this truck since I've had it. That's why you're always replacing brakes, because you're always braking so hard." And so that that mindset is still, like, I need to change my mindset in the way that I brake if I don't want to find myself constantly at the auto parts store getting brakes. And it's the same way with marriage, right? If you don't want to find yourself constantly looking for the new mate, looking for the new model, because you haven't changed your mindset, you're still handling that marriage, you're still handling the new person in the same way that you handle the last person. And so you're probably going to get the same results.
Exactly.
And be looking for that new car once again.
And that gets expensive.
It gets very expensive. The courts love it.
Hey.
Yeah. And so our goal is to, as my wife pointed out, our mission is to equip, a relationship with tools to go the distance. So not only that we teach you how to maintain, or try to help you be able to teach you principles how to maintain your marriage, but also things break. Things
Mm-hmm.
break and they need repair. And so we also incorporate tools on how to repair it, the relationship as well. And so we provide, tools and principles on both levels, whether it's maintenance or whether it's a repair job, because the reality of it that when we come into a marriage, some of us come into a marriage already broken,
Yes.
Exactly.
and everybody bring baggage and luggage into their marriages and stuff. And so some marriages start off broken because of lack of understanding, and as I said in the scriptures, for lack of understanding my people will perish. And so
Mm-hmm.
we help to bring that understanding into the relationships. So that's one of the reasons why we recommend, you know couples who are about to get married, premarital counseling,
Mm-hmm.
so they can prepare them and provide them with the tools necessary to maintain and repair their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can keep going on, so I'm gonna let my wife. Um,
Oh, it's one of my favorite. Marriage. I write romance, and so um, marriage is one of my favorite topics. I think in part because a lot of times people unconsciously repeat what they see
Oh yeah,
with their parents' relationships,
absolutely.
and regardless of whether their parents are together or not, they tend to repeat what they see.
Oh yeah.
yes.
And I just had a conversation earlier today with a cousin of mine, and I was telling him, I say, look, don't be scared. You are not your father. You are not your mother. Your
Mm,
girlfriend is not her mother, and you are not her father. And my mom has
Mm,
a saying that she tells us: you can learn two things from everybody: what to do and what not to do.
mm. Correct.
And so it applies, very aptly with marriage. If you want to maintain your marriage, even if you never saw your parents go to marriage counseling, you never, knew anything about it, just realize that it's something that, every marriage needs an objective tune up. I can know the noise in my that's happening with my car, but I have to call the mechanic to help me do some expert maintenance and fixing.
That's
And
right.
that's what good marriage therapists are, and counselors are. They help. They help with that process because you can see the signs that something's wrong. Like when I saw that smoke coming out the other week out of the rear wheel, I thought it was the tire. It was not. It was the caliper.
Oh,
So that is what sound counsel does, right? It
absolutely.
directs us in the way
yes.
that
Yeah.
we need to go. And so, hats off to you, Riley, said the
Thank
marriage
you.
Thank you.
technicians. We are so happy to have you with us today on day 23 of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2022. And Mrs. Andrea Riley is going to do our reading for us today. And so we're so happy that you are here giving voice to words written by Black people.
Oh, thank
All
you
right.
so much. So again, we're very honored to be here. And so this was from a period. This refers back to a period where we didn't know what we were doing. So this is not, yeah. When we needed that, we needed some repairs and that tune up. All right. So this is called Father Knows Best. And it was a blog that I wrote a while ago. So over the years, I've received a fair share of advice on the topic of marriage. In retrospect, I could place the advice into three distinct categories: good, great, and not so much. When recently asked the best piece of marital advice I'd ever gotten, this fatherly wisdom emerged as the greatest of the great category. At first glance, it might seem a bit unorthodox. So, to add context, I'll provide the backstory. Cliff and I met in February 1991 and immediately fell head over heels in love. We spent every possible moment together. We would talk on the phone till the wee hours of the morning, firmly convinced that our relationship was a gift from God. After a brief 5-month courtship, we tied a knot on a hot, humid June day. Never before had a couple taken their vows more seriously. Determined to prove to the world that our love would stand the test of time, we embarked upon our journey, excited and full of anticipation. The honeymoon stage of our marriage lasted about 6 months. Our biggest challenges had been disagreements over money. Early on, it had become obvious that I was a saver and he was a spender. These differences had led to conflict after conflict regarding finances. From my point of view, Cliff's uncontrolled use of the ATM card was infuriating. From his vantage point, my yelling and screaming about it was probably just as frustrating. But we were still passionately in love. So, despite the financial potholes, traffic jams, and detours, we always seemed to navigate our relationship back on course. Little did we know that just beyond the next bend, we would encounter a proverbial fork in the road. Without warning, we came to an abrupt halt, accompanied by screeching brakes, trails of tire marks, and racing heartbeats. His children's biological mother was on the other end of the phone, ranting and pissing and pitching a hissy fit. Fed up with their adolescent daughter, she threatened to throw her onto the streets if he didn't take her in right away that very day. Yes, this was indeed a fork in the road if I had ever seen one. My instincts were screaming, no, no more back and forth games. If the child is going to live here with us, then let's revise the custody agreement and adjust the child support order. Nothing I said could persuade Cliff to require the children's mother to set the legal affairs in order as a condition for us taking the child in. He was overwhelmed by images of his sweet, innocent little girl of yesteryear panhandling on the street corner with a sign marked, homeless, will work for food. Those daunting thoughts caused him to defy all sound judgment. Our daughter moved in on that very day with only the clothes on her back and the shoes on her feet. Literally. She came with no belongings, not so much as a toothbrush. Now, as the official keeper of the budget, this was problematic for me. Having to dip into our barely existent savings to repurchase things that she already owned began building resentment in my heart. And because the child support order had not been addressed, we had an extra mouth to feed while the money continued to be deducted from Cliff's pay and sent to a person who was no longer feeding that mouth.
Mm, mm.
What bothered me the most is that on any given day, the child's biological mother could have apprehended her and we would have had no legal recourse. All this was due to Cliff ignoring my wise advice. Suddenly, the honeymoon had ended, and the road to bliss became the road to hell. We were contending with a defiant adolescent who was upset about having been sent to live with us. Now, for anyone who's raised a rebellious teen, that's probably enough said to paint the picture. We dealt with phone calls from the school counselor informing us that our daughter had been absent more than 40 days that school year, and it was only April. We learned how close she was to failing the seventh grade. And add to that sarcasm, nasty attitudes, disrespect, sense of entitlement, and other teenage garbage. Money was becoming tighter by the day. Cliff was dealing with the weight of guilt over his children having been subjected to manipulative games all their lives. And I was wading through a cesspool of bitterness, feeling my life was being adversely affected by his poor decision making. Where was the undying love that we had experienced such a short time ago? Perhaps those loving feelings were lost between the sea of guilt and the pool of resentment. Or maybe they were hiding beneath the arguments, the misunderstandings, the silent treatments, the slamming doors, the confusion, the money problems, the crap. Wherever they were hidden, we were hard pressed to find them. At that moment in time, I was bombarded with thoughts of how a divorce would solve all my problems. After
Mm.
all, I could have killed two birds with one stone and detached myself from them both with one simple legal procedure. And who would have blamed me? I wasn't the one who kept making poor judgment calls, nor the one who had repeatedly overdrawn our checking account by the unrestrained use of the ATM card. Nor did I bring the belligerent child and the baby mama drama into the relationship. And I certainly wasn't the pig-headed, stubborn one who refused to heed the wise counsel of their spouse. Almost convinced that it was time to cut my losses, I reached out to the only man I was certain had my best interests at heart, my father. If
Mm.
no one else had my back, Daddy did. Although I love my father dearly, I was fully aware that he may not have been the best source of relationship advice. His track record was not exactly exemplary, but at the very least, I knew he really loved me and he would not want me to be unhappy. So I made the call. Hysterical, frustrated, and disillusioned, I poured out my heart to my father during that fateful phone call. Bewildered, I desperately looked to Daddy to answer my anxious barrage of questions. How could we have possibly wound up in this place? Where did we go wrong? How did we get to this juncture? And was this the end of the road for us? Dad listened patiently as complaint after complaint about this man who he had lovingly given me away to the year before in the presence of a minister, many witnesses, and most importantly, God Almighty. They just came gushing out. It was as if a dam had ruptured. The flow of grievances was unstoppable. To this day, I am not sure if he realized how dramatically the fatherly advice he was about to give would impact me.
Mm.
First, he admitted that he did not have the answers that would resolve my dilemma. He went on to say that he could not explain why it was this way, but he had one word of wisdom to share. The next four words he would utter were simple yet profound. They would change my life forever. Y'all ready?
Ready.
He said, "We're all that way." This statement turned my universe inside out. I am thoroughly convinced that it caused a tear in my time space continuum. He went on to state that he didn't know why they, meaning men, were that way. It didn't make sense. It was totally illogical, and there was no reasonable answer for it. But that was just simply the way it was. Those four words induced a major paradigm shift and lay a foundation for a new way of thinking. I hung up the phone and immediately entered into a violent wrestling match with my own thoughts. The right side of my brain attempted to rationalize this information by listing its implications. Number one, if all men were pig-headed. Two, if they were all too prideful to ask for advice. Three, if none of them would heed sound wisdom if it came from his wife. Four, If all of them would resist change at every turn. 5, if all of them would consider their wives nags and babbling idiots for offering correction. 6, if none of them wanted to be accountable for how they handled money. 7, the list went on and on and on. My analytical side concluded, if men are all alike, then I might as well do my best to work things out with the husband I already have. I mean, how ludicrous to start all over with another man with the full knowledge I would inevitably encounter the same issues with husband number 2, husband number 3, and so on. That was the day I resolved to learn how the male species worked and to use that information to try to stick it out with Cliff. As I look back 3 decades later, I realized that I made the best choice. Obviously, one could debate whether the statement is true of all men, but what is not debatable is that Daddy's advice served as sutures that held our ruptured marriage together while allowing it time to heal. 30 years later, I'm still thankful for the advice because the relationship that I had considered junking has evolved into a classic. The end.
Fantastic. Your father's very wise. Your father is very wise.
Yes.
I'm learning more and more. So I think men will probably say that they're able to flip that and say they're all that way. Right?
Probably.
I think
they need to write the blog.
but they need to be the one to write the blog.
They didn't write
it. They have to be the one to write the blog. It is very the challenges of marriage are far and wide. Ecclesiastes certainly tells us there's nothing new under the sun, but it certainly feels new, like when you're in the midst of something or you're dating someone and you're like, who is this person? And that's whether you're the male or the female. You're like, who is this person? Like where were you hiding? Because I thought there was someone else.
That's because you met their avatar. So when we meet people, when we go out and we're on our best behavior, that's the avatar. We send our representative to the date and to the, until we get the person hooked. And then you see the true them. And it's like, who? That's when you say, who are you?
Yeah.
Yes. It's like dating someone who gets distracted easily. And before you know it, you're all over the place. And you're like, no, that's no.
Right. There is, my wife wrote that. And over the years, when I think about it, there is a lot of validity to that because the position that we are in as men, as far as when it comes to marriage. And I heard someone once says that our marriage and my wife is like a reflection of me. Mm-hmm. And so, and that is so true because when I go out, if I talk to other, married men, if I talk to their wives, I can almost tell what type of marriage they have just by looking at their wife, looking at her body language, how she's talking, her attitude, her mindset. And it's a reflection because the unique position that we have in the marriage as far as being the head, and being the leader. Not that our wives are behind us or whatever, they're right beside us. But I always say my marriage is going to go how I go. My wife is going to go how I go. So the way I treat her, the way I love her, the way I respect her, and everything is going to determine how she goes, and then so on. Then with the children, and because see, marriage to me is generational, and
Yes.
marriage is legacy as well too. A lot of people really don't realize that marriage is especially when there's children involved, and so and we have to be mindful. Yeah, all the love and stuff is good, the lovey-dovey and stuff is good, but there's work to be done. I mean, and so much in building a marriage and building generations of successful marriages and everything like that. And so but it all depends on how we set the model, the template for our children and our children's children.
Yeah, because there are those conscious and unconscious habits that are picked up from watching marriages, and whether it's the way a father speaks to, a husband speaks to his wife, or the way that a wife speaks to her husband. Those are, there may be conscious or unconscious repetition of those things. And in the legacy of love, they could be the wrong thing to pass along. And you find out, like, why is she so difficult, or why is he so difficult? And it's in part they're either repeating. It's like parenting. I this is what I believe. You're either going to repeat what you know. You are either not going to do the things the way that you were parented, or you're going to find out new information about parenting. The easiest thing to do is to repeat what we know. And that's certainly the case in marriage. The easiest thing to do is to repeat what you've already encountered, right? Or you can make a conscious decision that I won't do those things. Or you can get new information and figure out which pieces you need to keep and which pieces you need to lay aside.
Yes.
And I think a good marriage service technician can help you with that.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I have been so happy to have you here today, and for a wonderful conversation on day 23 of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. Our guests today are Cliff and Andrea Riley, and we are just, I'm so pleased, and I must thank Miss Patricia Watley, for her recommendation that you need the Rileys.
Thank you, Cousin Pat. Can I mention our website so if people did want to reach us?
Yes. So I was going to ask you, please let people know how they can reach you at the Marriage Service Technicians.
Okay. So our website is themarriagetext.com. It's themarriagetext, TECHS.com. And you can also find us on Instagram. We might have to read it. Okay. Instagram, Marriage Service Technicians. Facebook, Marriage Service Technicians. Oh, no, Instagram is Marriage Service Techs. Excuse me. YouTube and Facebook is Marriage Service Technicians.
Okay. You can find the Rileys at themarriagetext.com and on social media. And we are just so happy to have you here today. I think it has been an insightful conversation, and one that will be quite helpful to helping people learn how to navigate and put together their marriage, keep it from breaking, do some preventive maintenance, but also if there is repair, to do the repair as well. Well, tomorrow is day 24 of the Great Black Read Aloud Day. We've been reading all month. We have a few more days to read, and we want to remind you of what those days are. And tomorrow is day 24, and it is paranormal. And so we read from all genres around the world. And so some things get very hairy, and tomorrow may be one of those days. And so we want to say that we have had the pleasure of Cliff and Andrea Riley today here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2022, Day 23, Marriage. Thank you for visiting with us, telling us about your company, the Marriage Service Technicians, and reading aloud for us, where we are here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, giving voice to words written by Black people all around the world. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for being our guest today. And we look forward to talking with you again.
Okay. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.